The universe isn't a poem, it isn't a song, it's a machine. Alone. The locals call it the tapestry, but that implies art. It's not art. It's engineering on a scale that makes a supernova look like a spark plug misfire. Threats of reality, gravity, electromagnetism, the weak and strong nuclear forces, and the fifth variants that nobody likes to talk about stretch through dimensions. They vibrate, they hum, and if you know where to put your finger, you can feel the pulse. The locals also whisper about a Time Lord. Sounds grand, doesn't it? Like royalty. But I've seen the footprints. He wasn't a king, he was a mechanic. A maintenance man for the infinite. He left his tools lying around blueprints for a box that is bigger on the inside and a wormhole generator that twists physics into a pretzel, and then he vanished. Now we have the Pythagoreans, a bunch of math-obsessed zealots led by Hockney trying to derive God from a quadratic equation. They think if they solve for x, they own the store. They're wrong. But they're dangerous enough to break the machine before they figure that out. The Infinite Wormhole Inversion Constructor, the grant committee called it the IWIC. I called it the Wick was throwing a tantrum. Again. Stabilize, you piece of junk, I muttered, tapping the glass gauge of the Tachyon manifold. The needle jittered in the red, threatening to bury itself past the safety line. The smell of ozone and burning insulation hung heavy in the air, the perfume of cutting-edge physics. I adjusted the vernier caliper on the flux feed, a micrometer to the left. The hum dropped an octave, smoothing out into a purr. Better. The lab was a mess. A graveyard of half-eaten sandwiches and cannibalized electronics, but the wick was beautiful. It was an ugly, brutal pile of copper and crystal, but it did the one thing the standard model said was impossible. It folded space like a napkin. I picked up my coffee mug, cold. It was always cold. I was about to reach for the soldering iron when the red phone rang. It wasn't a digital chirp. It was an honest-to-God mechanical bell. Shrill enough to wake the dead and annoying enough to make you wish they'd stayed asleep. It was a secure line, hardwired, shielding against everything from EMPs to eavesdropping telepaths. Only 3 people had the number. 2 of them were dead, which narrowed the list considerably. I let it ring twice while I checked the field stabilizer. Prioritization is the hallmark of a disciplined mind. Dr. X, I said into the receiver. Pack a bag, Crease. The voice was gravel tumbling in a cement mixer. Yousef. He sounded tired. He always sounded tired, which usually meant he'd been awake for 3 days watching a satellite feed in a bunker. I'm in the middle of a calibration, Yousef, I said, cradling the phone against my shoulder as I tweaked a dial. The wick is actually holding a charge. If I shut it down now, I lose 3 weeks of cold fusion sequencing. Forget the wick. We found it. My hand froze on the dial. Define it. I've had 3 its this month, and one of them turned out to be a weather balloon. Megiddo, he said. The word hit the room like a sudden drop in pressure. I set the soldering iron down, carefully. You're sure? Seismic resonance matches the Pythagorean signature, Yousef said. The SVR's already moving assets. They think it's a weapons cache. We know better. Armageddon, I said. It tasted like copper in my mouth. Hockney is making his play. We have a window, Crease, a small one. If the Pythagoreans get the geometry locked in, they aren't just going to open a door. They're going to tear the frame off the wall. Yousef paused. I need the Weaver, not the physicist. I looked at the wick. It was humming, a gateway to anywhere, a machine built on the blueprints of a ghost. Then I looked at the TARDIS schematic pinned to the corkboard, buried under takeout menus and unpaid electric bills. Where are we meeting? The usual spot. Bring the portable unit. And Crease. Yeah, bring a gun. Math doesn't stop bullets. The line clicked dead. I hung up and looked around the sanctum. The Ethereal laboratory, the press called it. It was a basement in Maine with good shielding. Megiddo, I whispered to the empty room. The ancient texts called it a battlefield. The Time Lord's notes called it a crucible, a pressure point in the multiverse where the membrane was thin. If Hockney and his cult of geometry fetishists were setting up shop there, they weren't looking for a fight. They were looking for a lock, and they had the key, or they thought they did. I went to the safe behind the false panel of the bookcase. Inside was a passport, a wad of non-sequential cash, and a kinetic pulse pistol that technically didn't exist in this timeline. I checked the charge on the pistol. Full. Tomorrow's secrets, I muttered, quoting one of Hockney's pompous pamphlets. Tomorrow can wait. Today, I have to stop the world from ending. I grabbed my go bag and killed the power to the wick. The hum died. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the ghosts of things that hadn't happened yet. Time to go to work,